Hello guys, this is Jay Calderon with 12ROUNDER Radio. This is 12rounder.com, of course. Thank you for listening. Apologize for the absence last week. For those of you that cared, I was a bit sick. Still sound a bit sick, I'm pretty sure. But nonetheless, here getting it going again. And obviously we had a couple of pretty interesting cards, pretty interesting fights over the weekend. Rances Bartholomew beat Francisco Suedo in a pretty one-sided affair, 120-108, I believe, on every single card. Josh Warrington arrived in the featherweight division. Of course, this happened in Leeds. Very exciting card, especially that main event. Same card, Ricky Burns returned to winning ways, though it wasn't exactly his vintage self. Nonetheless, you can check that out and all the stuff, of course, on 12rounder.com and in the link below for quick results. Let's get right into it, though. The big news that really sort of interested me, that entertained me over the week, was this idea, this notion, if you will, that former Golden Boy CEO Richard Schaefer might be teaming up with Mayweather and Mayweather Promotions to work with Mayweather, for the foreseeable future. Now, from just about everyone that you listen to or you talk to or you hear comments from, Schaefer certainly was viewed at the very least as the sort of mind behind Golden Boy. He was the guy that made the deals. He was the guy that did the planning. He worked closer with the networks, the fighters, and in particular Floyd Mayweather. And when you think of that and you think of the success Golden Boy had in a relatively short period of time, especially when they were doubted, especially going against, such a staple in the sport and top rank, when you look at it, you think, okay, Schaefer might be able to get some things done for Mayweather. Mayweather's certainly the biggest star the sport has, and certainly the biggest money guy. Certain things could happen there. They also seem to have a mutual respect and fondness for one another. Mayweather seems to credit Schaefer and not De La Hoya, particularly when he's talking about the success he had teaming up with Golden Boy. And they seem to be, well, rather, more importantly, Schaefer seemed to be the bridge between De La Hoya and his company and Mayweather. When he was then released, when Oscar at least outwardly suggested that he was interested in working with rival promoter Top Rank, Richard Schaefer wasn't interested in such a move, and of course, there was the now well-known fallout between the pair. It seemed as though Mayweather distanced himself quite quickly from Golden Boy. Case in point, the first Marcos Maidana fight, which happened in May, was co-promoted by Golden Boy, and the second Marcos Maidana fight was the first Mayweather venture that was solely a Mayweather Promotions venture. It did, of course, have Golden Boy's fighters featured on the card, but for all intents and purposes, it was the first venture for Mayweather Promotions where it was a Mayweather Promotions event. And after the event, particularly CEO of Mayweather Promotions, Leonard Ellerbe, and longtime right-hand man of Floyd Mayweather, Leonard Ellerbe, got a bit of flack from Mayweather himself for how the event was run, how certain things, comps, how the fight was set up, the professionalism or lack thereof sort of was handled and everything like that. And of course, you're now led to believe that perhaps, displeased with his current CEO, very familiar and comfortable with a former CEO from Golden Boy and Richard Schaefer, of course that move could be made. And potentially adding fuel to that fire, of course, is the fact that De La Hoya himself doesn't even seem all that opposed, for the right price, of course, to releasing Schaefer, who allegedly has a contractual obligation to Golden Boy through 2018. He doesn't seem to have a problem releasing Schaefer from those duties, basically just sitting on the sideline, and potentially allowing him to work with Mayweather. He said so himself in an interview that he was not one to stop someone from making a living, and so long as that he was able to be properly compensated for the official release of Schaefer, he would have no issue with such a move. The question is, of course, if something were to occur, or maybe the question at the very least that interests me, is if such a move were to occur, what would it mean? And more accurately, more importantly rather, how well would it work? There's this part of you again that says, Schaefer's the guy that's looked at as the brain trust for De La Hoya. Schaefer's the guy that made all the moves. Schaefer was certainly the figurehead at the very least, or maybe not the figurehead, that would be De La Hoya to a certain extent, but he was certainly the face of the company in terms of who you heard from, and when it came to front office, and he was certainly the guy that seemed to represent the fighters. He was the guy in the ring, he was the guy telling you the next move, so on and so forth. He seemed like the guy putting all the pieces together, if you will. And maybe he's a very capable guy in that respect. I don't know how much help he got, of course. I wasn't in those meetings. I don't know exactly what he did from that perspective. He came from a banker background, a banking background, I should say. So it's not as though it's a guarantee that all these things are true. But let's, for the sake of argument, assume that they are all true. And he was the guy making these moves. He was the guy doing all of these sorts of things. Here's the question. Does it matter? Let's look at this quite clearly. Quite plainly, if you will. When De La Hoya decided he wanted to start his own promotional company, he wanted to go out there, he wanted to be a major player and a major force in this sport, he had three things going for him. Three things that ultimately led to, inevitably, this sort of success. Number one, he was a big star himself, and he was still able to promote his own fights, so he was certainly going to have at least one star that was going to get them through perhaps some rougher early years. Number two, he had another star in Floyd Mayweather, who at the very least was contractually obligated to give him some fights. He wasn't necessarily signed to Golden Boy, but Golden Boy would have a shot at staging or helping to stage some of his fights, which of course would give them, again, some big dates to look forward to while they build up their fighters and build up their roster, and of course, feature their fighters on those undercards. And the third thing they had, of course, was that they signed other fighters of note. Fighters that were free to be signed up, and to be truthful, everything seemed to line up with them purposely. Perfectly rather. They didn't sign Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins is a free agent, but they did sign him up to a deal that would keep him incorporated with Golden Boy in a certain sense. They signed up Marco Antonio Barrera at the time. They signed up Shane Mosley. Fighters that still had a bit of cachet, could still go out there and potentially make history. On the one hand, you could promote that certainly, and they could also face younger fighters, which would give their younger Golden Boy fighters that they were able to build up the chance to then go out and face these living fighting legends that still had a potential big fight in them or two. But if you look at Mayweather Promotions, that's really not the case in any major way. Mayweather has 2 fights left. That's not exactly... If you wanted to say, okay, he comes back for one extra fight, a big money fight, maybe that's the Manny Pacquiao fight that everyone will have to talk about. Maybe. Okay, fine. That's 3 fights. That's maybe till, what, May of 2016? And by that point, they have to have done 2 of the other things. Sign a huge star, or at the very least be a part of and involved in the career of one of the biggest stars in the sport. In this case, it was Mayweather with Golden Boy, and with Mayweather Promotions, it has to be someone like Mayweather now, all the while signing up other good quality established names that can help them build in the interim. Here's a fun little fact about Mayweather Promotions. Okay, the most successful fighter they have, aside from, of course, Mayweather, signed to TMT or Mayweather Promotions, whatever you want to consider it, the most successful fighter that is associated with Floyd Mayweather, that is not, of course, Floyd Mayweather, would be Mickey Bey, because he's won a title at lightweight. But are you really going to be able to build a stable around a guy who just won his first title, has already been stopped before and has a loss, has had a failed drug test in the past, that's a lightweight, that has all these things that are working against him and isn't really a household name to begin with? It's not as though there's all this good or there's all this bad, but there is some good. There's really just, some good stuff there, but nothing star potential-y about it. And then all that other stuff I just mentioned was just terrible, like the fact that time is against him, like the fact that the lightweight division, while interesting for a hardcore fan, is not the biggest division in the world, and certainly isn't the most lucrative division in the world. you're really not going to build your promotion around that fighter, is my point. And I like Mickey Bay, for the record. He's a decent fighter when he's in there against the right sort of opponent. He can definitely be in some interesting fights. He just needs to stay focused throughout the entire fight. But that's besides the point. It doesn't matter how interested in his fights I am. The fact of the matter is you're not building your promotional company around him. And really, I don't, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it doesn't seem like fighters are so ready to go into that team atmosphere at Mayweather Promotions. You don't see fighters even really contemplating that move, and maybe they don't have the capital for it. Maybe they haven't pursued fighters yet because they're still focused on Mayweather and his career and the fighters they already have signed, or whatever the case may be. It just doesn't seem as if there are that many fighters when they become free agents, or when they're thinking about either re-signing with this company or maybe going with another company, or whatever the case may be. You just don't see them really going out there and looking to sign with Mayweather Promotions. Most of the time, when a fighter's big enough that you'd want to sign him up when he's a free agent anyway, you get the sense that someone like Andre Ward or someone like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., you get the sense that they probably want to branch out on their own and be their own company and just at the very least promote themselves so they get more of the money in the long run. It doesn't seem like everyone's just dying to sign to Mayweather Promotions, where for a time it seemed like a lot of people were looking to sign to Golden Boy Promotions. My point, I guess, being that while Schaefer, I'm sure, could help, he seems like a very bright guy, and who knows if that's even going to happen. Of course, much of this is speculation. I just don't know if he's going to be able to work the sort of magic that he did perhaps work with Golden Boy with Mayweather Promotions. So to me, and again, this was all brought up, or I should say this was all brought up because someone asked me what did I think of the chances for Mayweather Promotions to be a major player in the sport if this move were to occur. And again, not fully sure. I don't know. No one knows. That's the fun in it, of course. But the thing that made Golden Boy work was that a lot of things fell into place. A lot of fighters wanted to sign. It made a lot of sense. It felt like they were rebelling against the established promotional outfits in the country. In this case, Don King, perhaps even Gary Shaw, or Lou DiBella, perhaps even in Bernard Hopkins' case, and of course Top Rank. But I don't get that vibe with Mayweather. And I don't believe Mayweather has enough time to turn that page, because he only has 2 or 3, maybe, fights left. It's a very interesting one, in my opinion, though. It'd be interesting if it worked to have 3 major players in the same country, I should say. It would be very interesting, and it'd be interesting to see how, of course, it worked out. And, of course, I'd be interested in your take on this as well. So be sure, leave it in the comments, or, of course, hit me up on Twitter at 12RounderBoxing. Love to hear what you have to think about potentially Mayweather and Richard Schaefer teaming up at Mayweather Promotions. If that is to occur, of course, what do you think might happen? How do you think it plays out? What do you think would be their chances of success? All that great stuff. Leave it, of course, in the comments and on Twitter. And, of course, click over to part 2, where I'm going to be talking about the recent summit between the Alphabet Boys, and they were talking about their new ideas and concepts, of course, for boxing, and we'll delve into that a little bit more in part 2, so be sure to click over for that. And, of course, click the links in the description below. And, again, comment, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. See you in part 2.